Hello, I'm Rob Akert with Security Systems News, and I'm at the ISC West 2019, joined by Darnell Washington. Hello, Darnell. How are you?
Hi there. Very good. How are you doing?
Yeah, great. So Darnell is the president and CEO of SecureXperts.
Yes.
So I'm sure you have a wealth of knowledge that you can share with us today, and we appreciate that.
Well, thank you very much. Glad to be here.
Yeah. So the first question for you, now that physical security integrators are finally recognizing cybersecurity as a real threat, what are maybe some real steps that you've seen that vendors have taken to ensure their products are really secure?
Well, there once was a day that we were mostly used just checking the boxes, and as far as a lot of regulatory standards, they had to go under periodic reviews of maybe every year, or on the most outside of every 3 years. But mostly it was a paper exercise where they would check some boxes to say, do you conform to this policy or not? And then every so often they would ask you to prove some kind of an artifact or some kind of a document that your product meets that. But now there are a lot of electronic tools that can use a process which is called continuous data monitoring, which evaluate the constant state of the security of those products. And now that the manufacturers and the vendors are starting to employ these tactics and these kinds of designs into the security, it makes the products a lot more secure. And to understand whether a security baseline that they had as far as if something doesn't meet or it's not conformant to a policy, it's immediately alerts and identifies to those vendors and the stakeholders that are involved that these products might not be as secure as they used to be.
We all want to be secure in every way.
Well,
right?
I'll tell you what, the industry's come a long way as far as from the area where manufacturers were not as transparent and visible, that now that they know that the IoT devices are becoming more interconnected, it's very important that they can prove that they're not being a vulnerability to their customers to damage their reputation and liability.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit more about what are some of the main solutions that your company, is doing with regulatory compliance, as well as maybe reduced liability from cybersecurity frameworks.
Yeah, well, SecureXperts as a company, we provide an end-to-end cybersecurity lifecycle and device security by embedding what's called a trusted platform module, which is an actual hardware device that's embedded in these chips that can safely store digital certificates and credentials, and moving away from usernames and passwords, which we've always known to be the long source of vulnerabilities. The other thing that our company does is we do a variety of security services and testing where we can look at hardware manufacturers and vendors and align them with what's called the NIST cybersecurity framework, which will identify whether there are industrial control systems gaps and weaknesses and really harden their systems to a level that in the event that they have a security vulnerability, that the end users in those end states can not only be identified that they do have vulnerabilities, but they can shut them down or take them off their network as not being trusted if they're not compliant with a lot of the regulatory guidelines and the liability is too great for a customer to continue to use these products.
Yeah, for sure. One thing I'm hearing here at the show is strategic alliances. So, it seems that physical security integrators they're coming together with super partnerships and the strategic alliances, both with IT, cloud services, cybersecurity firms. Where is that all heading? And tell us, more about from your perspective.
Sure. Well, this is one of the most interesting conversations that have been told. You're starting to see the Amazons, the Googles, and the Microsofts companies and large corporations starting to really get involved from a privacy and protection issue. Whereas the ease, and I've always been a person who's been saying we're doing too much in the area of trading privacy for convenience. And we're becoming so used to things being easy that we don't have any levels of protection over our privacy and privacy controls. But what we're starting to see is that these industry and the systems integrators and working with these large super teams is that there needs to be a limited amount or a greater amount of transparency and visibility into who's collecting your data, what are they using it for, and how are they able to protect the privacy using things like the GDPR, which is called the General Data Protection Requirements, and other areas. So what I see is the industry and regulatory compliance starting to come more into play to allow us to have a better sense of privacy and protection over what people are doing with our technology. So these super teams that we can see is that they're going to continue to evolve, but us as consumers and people who are using this technology, we're going to start demanding that we have a better level of protection. And these super teams that are being formed are now going to start taking into account that there are more privacy and levels of controls that need to take place.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So, in closing, one last question. What would be some next steps on how someone can get in touch with you, or a next step that you would recommend maybe an attendee or one of our readers of Security Systems News takes?
Well, I would think that the first thing that you would need to do is to look and work with your trusted advisors in the areas of cybersecurity. The guidelines and the evolving strategies that have been produced by the National Institute of Standards and Technology and NIST, and being able to perform self-assessments and then hiring qualified consultants to assist you in meeting those security controls in those areas is really a good step. And I think that now that the message is really getting out about how important cybersecurity is, that they need to become aware and not just wait until a document is pushed from a regulatory standpoint to play catch up, because the evolution of IoT and manufacturing process is sometimes a year-long or multi-year process. They need to take the steps now to make sure that they're meeting the levels of compliance to protect privacy in other areas, as opposed to waiting for regulatory enforcement.
Amazing. So we just met with Darnell Washington. He is the president and CEO of SecureXperts. We appreciate your time and all of your knowledge.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I think that in the future, we're going to start seeing a lot more changes that are going to occur in the industry, and the world will be a safer place.
It will be. Yes. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you very much. Okay.